We're going to stand for a moment of silence. Now, recently we had a state trooper. His name was Jeffrey Harris. The man was a great man. He served this county well, and he suddenly left us too soon, far too soon. So as we go into this moment of silence, I hope some of you will say a prayer for the family, think about the family, and make a point to always reach out to our folks in blue and thank them for their service and keep them in our hearts and prayers. Thank you. Mr. Barton, would you lead us in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And before we begin public comments, we have a couple housekeeping items to do. Mr. Reed, we need to make that adjustment of swapping reports, appointments, directives, and correspondence with new and unfinished business. Can you make that motion? We're just swapping some items in here.
So we're switching sections 4 and 5?
Correct.
Yeah, so I make that amendment to the agenda.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Let's do this without objection. Any objection? Hearing no objection, motion passes. In the consent agenda, we will be pulling the Older Americans Month proclamation. Mr. Reed will read that to us. We will get to that after our public comments. So going into public comments, we have folks who have signed up to speak today. We have a number of you. Some of you may have not had the chance to put your name on the list. There will be an opportunity for you to speak after those who have signed up have spoken. Please be reminded that you as an individual are given 3 minutes sharp. Mr. Reed will be our timekeeper. You forgot your phone. I will be the timekeeper. And groups will be given 5 minutes. So what we will have happen is when you come before, state your name, address, and if you do represent a group, please be specific of who that group is, and you will be recognized for the 5 minutes. I will give you a 30-second warning with this high-quality sign that we got here. And then I'll start waving the stop sign and interrupt you when we get there. So if we could all just be respectful, keep our comments to the topics that are important to you all and this board, and we will get through this meeting efficiently and effectively and hearing all the important things today. First person who signed up to speak is Beth Ann Driscoll. Hello. Can you make sure the mic is on? Should be green light.
No.
Just push that push button.
Hello.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
First, I'm Beth Ann with the cabins at Crabtree Falls. I reside at 11078 Crabtree Falls Highway, Tyler, Virginia, 22976. First and foremost, I would like to thank the board for your time, not only today, but over the last 2 weeks. I know several of you have taken a considerable amount of your time out of your lives to read emails, to speak with us on the phone, and to meet with us in person for face-to-face meetings. I'm aware that your time is precious, and we appreciate the time that you've taken that's necessary to hear the Nelson County people that you represent. I'm certain that you have heard all of the arguments over the tax increase numerous times, and that they'll be presented to you today again. For that reason, I'll just skip to offering up solutions rather than arguments. Every person here in this room absolutely loves Nelson County. That's why our families have stayed here for multiple generations. That's why we've moved here. That's why we've built our businesses here. The room is just filled with people who love Nelson County. Every person in this room has the same goal. We all want to make Nelson County the absolute best that it can be for local and tourist alike. We want our schools to have more sufficient funds. We want our locals to be able to continue to live here. We want our locals to have an abundance of job opportunities without having to travel to other counties. We want to support and promote tourism in our beautiful county, and we want to see Nelson flourish. While raising the TOT may seem like an easy fix to obtain funds, I'm positive at this point in time that you guys have the knowledge to realize it would harm tourism in the lodging business, and that it simply would not obtain the tax revenue that you guys desire. Nothing that is good comes easy. Fixing the issue at hand will not be simple. It will take time. It will take effort. It'll take research and reaching out to other counties. It'll take research and time talking to other commissioners who face the problem and found solutions. Nelson County and numerous other counties, not only in the United States, but all across the world, have struggled with collecting taxes from services such as Airbnb, VRBO, and other privately rented accommodations. This problem is not a new issue. In fact, in 2017, San Luis Obispo County in California reached an agreement with Airbnb to remit and transmit tax funds for them. Other places have also been able to find the manpower, the technology, and the time to overcome the solution to this roadblock. If they were able to do it 5 years ago, we absolutely can do it today. I would like to make it clear that we're not against Airbnb or VRBO. We would like to play on a fair playing field, and others are not always following these rules. There are numerous resources that are available to us, such as the Restaurant, Lodging and Travel Association, specifically Rob Melvin and Roy Von Dorn, who've offered time, Fairfax County in Northern Virginia, and Maggie Ragone of Commissioner of Revenue of Stanton. In conclusion, prior to raising the taxes, under those who have followed the rules, we would prefer to obtain all of the tax revenue first before you do that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right, moving on to Monica Barker.
Yeah, it's hard to go after Beth Ann. I just found out about this morning, so I won't be as eloquent. My name's Monica Barker. We have 3 sisters at 164 Zinc Mill School Road, and we also have a STR at Wintergreen, and we live right down the hill. Having not been privy to the previous conversations, I just want to start by saying that I think that the increase in tax would have the unintended consequence of really hurting our tax base and tourism. We drive a lot of business here. We bring a lot of people to the county and a lot of tax revenue in doing so. Like Beth Ann, I wanted to focus more on solutions. So again, not knowing about this in advance, I didn't get a lot of thought into it, but Airbnb does collect local taxes for other counties. So I think it would be worthwhile to reach out to Airbnb and ask them to do so. I also noticed that there's a Facebook group for Wintergreen. It's called Wintergreen Owners That Rent. And being part of this Facebook group, I've noticed that people really are not educated. They don't understand that they need a business license. They don't understand that they have taxes to pay or that it's a business. They just think they're opening their home to other people. So I do think it's worthwhile to do an educational drive, whether it's something that's included in the water bill or however you want to do it to save funds. But I think people don't understand that they are responsible as a business owner. They don't think they do it as a business owner. So I think education would help as well. That would help you collect the revenue that you're looking to do. I also think that for those of us that are doing this legally and following the rules, imposing that higher tax would have, again, the unintended consequence of making us less competitive, because unfortunately consumers do compare things like that, and it does matter. And the ones that are paying taxes are probably the ones that are doing a lot of business, right? So as we become less competitive, we bring fewer people in, and we create jobs as well, the cleaners, the landscape people and such. So I implore us to look for other solutions. Another idea would be to go through the listings. I know there's not a lot of manpower, but maybe we could do interns or volunteers to go through the listings, and you can tell if somebody's collecting taxes because they'll state such in their listing, and you can also see who owns the property and the idea of where they are. So that might be another idea as well. So again, like Beth Ann said, I appreciate your time. I appreciate your consideration. We look forward to working with you towards a solution.
Thank you, ma'am. Claudette Dalton.
My name is Claudette Dalton. I live at 175 Rosewood Drive in Nellens Ford, and I'm here sort of as a substitute for several of the teachers who couldn't come to this session, including my son, who just got COVID for the 3rd time in his home. I want to remind you all, I think you have a letter that was sent by some of the teachers. I want to remind you that during the COVID, the teachers gave up their entire summer vacation to learn how to do digital teaching. They have bought their supplies always with their own money. They've not had a substantial raise, more than 2 or 3% since 2008. They're retiring in droves. You can't get a teacher's aide. Now they're doing the jobs of 2 or 3 people. And I encourage you, please, to look at the budget and see if you can find some way to support your teachers in a better way than you have today. I know that the budget comes from a different source, but I do encourage you to see what you can do for them. And I appreciate the time and the energy that you give to the county. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Libby?
Donna, I brought some copies of my testimony. I'm going to really abbreviate it. Mr. Chairman. I'd like to associate myself with the comments made by our previous 2 speakers. Like Monica, I became aware of this public comment period yesterday, so I pulled some materials together. You can imagine I'm in strong opposition to any increase in the tax, transient occupancy tax. We're currently, I think many of you already know, obviously we're currently paying 5%. We're also paying 5.3% to the state. Most of us that pay these taxes pass them on to our tenants, our renters. And if you were to increase the tax by doubling it to 10% for the county, we're going to have a very uncompetitive posture with all the surrounding counties. City of County of Albemarle, City of Charlottesville, Amherst, the rest of them. I mean, you're talking about the highest county tax rate in the state. So, my second point would be, well, I think I already gone through my second point. I believe strongly that if you raise these taxes, you're really not going to generate an additional amount of revenue for the county for a couple of reasons. First of all, the uncompetitive aspect of it, people will go farther afield, they'll go to Charlottesville or wherever. Secondly, I think that there are an awful lot of Airbnb weekend rental owners that will probably decide, given the real estate market right now, to close their facility down and just sell the property. So you won't generate even the current 5% that you're getting. I certainly think that I would be in that position. My property, by the way, I should have mentioned before I started, is on Patrick Henry Highway. It's called 3 Beaches, which is 9257 Patrick Henry Highway, although I live on Emily's Gap Road personally. I find it really hard to believe. I'm sure everybody in this room understands the current inflation rate, which some people estimate to be double what the official inflation rate is. We're having a hard time finding labor, whether it's housekeeping labor or groundskeeping labor. Our fuel costs are going up, our input costs are going up. And so you add an additional 5% tax on top of that, and it would really make it almost impossible to continue to stay in business. Beth Ann mentioned the difficulty in collecting this tax. Okay, I'll make this quick. There's something that has not yet been mentioned, and that is that last month the governor signed into law legislation that passed both the House of Delegates and the Senate pretty close to unanimously. There wasn't a great deal of debate about it. And it basically, when it's implemented, will compel Airbnb, VRBO, the vacation rental by owner, and some of the other what they call accommodation intermediary facilities to not only collect the tax, but distribute it to the county. Currently, right now, VRBO, I know.
30 seconds.
I'm getting the hook here.
Give you another 30.
I think that there are plenty of us in the industry that would be very happy to work with the Board of Supervisors and the revenue folks to help implement that law here, because it really is a major problem. I think a lot of owners really don't understand their obligation to pay that county tax and would do so, mainly because most of us pass it on to our renters. So if we can do anything to help with the implementation of that, I think it would answer the problem in generating legitimate revenues without jacking the rate up on the rest of us.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Moving on to Judith.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Yes.
I'd like to just give you a card. I'm here and in triplicate. I represent, hold on, if I may. Well enough. Thank you.
And if we could, to speed things up, if you have items that you need to give to the board, if you could give it to our staff and they'll circulate it. That way it doesn't, then you can continue talking and we get the item circulated. So,
Well, the good news
Thank
is
you.
I have nothing else to
Perfect.
pass out. I defer not only to my colleagues and the owner of
Perfect.
Three Beaches. I'm here to represent Foxy Morgan from Foxtrot at Farsalia. I'm also here to represent Carol Stratton, who owns Possum Trot on Old Roseland Road. And ourselves, we are new homeowners at 785 Jonesboro Road in Roseland. I thought up until I heard just last night about this meeting that Brent's Gap was our biggest obstacle to bringing people into Roseland to our Airbnb. A 5%, 100% increase in taxes would just about kill us in Roseland. I manage 5 Airbnbs, and so it is a real challenge to be able to collect what needs to be collected to run a business. We are astute business owners, I believe. I would like to humbly request that if there are notifications in the future, that they be made electronically as well as in the newspaper. I would never have known about this meeting and been able to come and speak to you, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity, but I wouldn't have known had it not been for Beth Ann and writing to 144 business owners in the area. The second thing is that we have the utmost respect for our commissioners of revenue. I think that their job has got to be almost impossible. Verbo, which used to be VRBO, sends a lump sum payment every month, but doesn't specify which of us are actually paying these taxes. So we would do anything we can to help support the commissioners in being able to show that the revenue is coming from our individual businesses. I have to tell you, it's almost impossible to find out from Airbnb what is owed. We know what is owed because we collect it, but what they actually pay. And I don't think that Airbnb takes the responsibility to pay to the county as they are supposed to. So I'm here to humbly ask that you help us as managers and owners of lodging businesses and work with us. Please, please reconsider this property or the tax hike. And I will defer to the next speaker. I thank you for giving us this opportunity. And please just give us a little more notice the next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. J. Roberts.
Good afternoon, Jay Roberts, WPOA. I've had numerous conversations over the last year with Pam to try and assist in some way of helping the county level the playing field. POA has been dealing with VRBO, this challenge, for the last probably year, thinking long and hard about what our options are. I have spent a great deal of time looking at other counties, other places like Wintergreen to try and understand what they've done. Not a single one of them have doubled the tax rate. What they've done is they've encouraged people in the community, businesses, VRB owners, to work with them to try and find a solution. I don't think this changes the VRBO challenge the county has, and that is the VRBOs that are popping up in random places all over the county and in many ways making life here a little bit different. But the reality is the solution is not a double. The solution is to embrace the people that are in the business to try and figure out how to make it more successful and put things in place for the county to control it. But there are lots of examples: Kiowa, Sea Pines, Hilton Head, Jekyll, all up and down the East Coast that have what we have in that part of the county near Wintergreen. It's just, it's their tourism. The rest of the county here doesn't experience what we have on that side of the county, but I think you can work with those folks to try and figure out a solution. And it may be a tax increase in the future, but this is, you guys got a sledgehammer for something that requires a screwdriver. I just encourage you to grab the screwdriver, encourage other people to assist, and come up with a different solution. Thank you.
Yep. Kurt Peterson.
Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the work you do. I actually didn't plan on talking, but I did want to give some support to the Airbnb and Verbo group. I'm an Airbnb owner up in Wintergreen. I'm at 33 Smoke Rise, and I wanted to thank Mr. Barton for picking up last night and talking. We had a good conversation. He explained why he thought a doubling tax was necessary. We respectfully disagreed. And I think one thing I didn't mention is that, look, we all understand inflation, prices go up, and the idea of getting revenue from people that don't live in the county is not a bad one, I have to say. You know, Vegas does it, right? I think the issue, which Jay just hit on, is the amount. I just think that doubling it is truly going to hurt a lot of us. You know, and suggest this is probably not a good idea, but you know, even 2% I could have lived with. I probably wouldn't even be here if you were just going to raise it 2%. But doubling does seem a bit extreme. So I hope y'all will reconsider. And again, thank you for your time and your attention on that.
Thank you. Reverend Rose.
My name is Reverend James Rose. I reside at 2225 Union Hill Drive in Louisiana. Good afternoon, members of the board. I come before this afternoon on behalf of a group of concerned citizens of Nelson County in regards to the Confederate statue located on the lawn in front of the Nelson County Courthouse. Our group, or a member of our group, has been before you on several occasions in regard to the Confederate statue in front of the courthouse. Other localities have had the same issue, and it was resolved by removing the statue or having it relocated without any problem. Also, other localities have been taken to court with the same issue and have lost. Our group has been very patiently waiting for the county to take action on this issue and have had no response from the county. The county failure to take any action leave our group no choice but to take further action, who would be an expense to the county. Our group is determined to have this issue resolved. Our group is not present today because we don't want to make this issue a spectacle. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Rose. William Harrell.
Good afternoon. I'm Billy Harrell. I'm a new resident of Nelson County. I moved up here in mid-December. I live at 567 Berry Hill Road, which is listed as Faber, Virginia, but is actually a dial. And I have a simple question regarding something I have no information about otherwise, but I had the occasion to call VDOT last week to make a complaint about the drainage ditches on either side of Berry Hill Road or block. And after talking a little bit with a service representative about that, I asked, do they have any plans for paving Berry Hill Road? It's 3.5 miles altogether, and the upper 1 mile up towards 151 Rockfish Valley Highway, that's paved, and then the lower 2.5 miles is not paved. And what he told me was that they wouldn't initiate something like that I needed to speak to the Board of Supervisors, and happened to see that the meeting was this Tuesday. So I've just come to ask, has it ever been, have they ever been approached about it, or is there any interest in it?
Mr. Jay Gamble?
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to speak today, especially related to the increase in the tourism tax. My name is Jay Gamble. I live at 926 Wintergreen Drive, and in disclosure, I'm General Manager of Wintergreen Resort. I wanted to speak on a couple parts of this bill that may be helpful for you as you consider whether you pass or reject this bill. First, I would say that Nelson County tourism is very, very specific discretionary tourism spending. Unlike larger municipalities who may have substantial businesses, airports, UVA as a university, as a medical center, many of the tourists who come to Wintergreen and to Nelson County are solely tourists. They're very sensitive to total cost, and we all have competitors. We survey our guests. We know other resorts they go to. They do not have to come to Nelson County or Wintergreen. And I'm afraid this will hurt many businesses in this county. Again, we take 151 and Wintergreen itself. We're somewhat of a lodging hub in that area for a lot of other businesses throughout the county. And so while the tax directly hurts lodging properties, I think the ripple effect will be harmful to many other businesses throughout the county who rely on tourism and rely on those tourists having a bed base. Another point is, quite honestly, we're just beginning to recover from the COVID pandemic. For 2 years, group business has been down substantially. People have not traveled. The phone is now starting to ring again. People are starting to return. And at a time when we really need a rebound, I'm afraid this tax will do the opposite and set us back again. Speaking of Wintergreen, we paid in the last 12 months maybe $264,000 in taxes. In a normal year, that should have been over $300,000, but that's the effect of COVID and the pandemic. Also, Wintergreen owns no lodging whatsoever. We rely on properties rented through us to host conferences, to host weddings, to host skiing. And again, where you choose to have your wedding, where you choose to have your conference, it's completely discretionary. And I would hate to see Nelson County lose those segments of businesses, which are very high spending. The more overnights a person stays, 1 night, 2 nights, 3 nights, with each successive night of spending, more spending occurs throughout the county. And so finally, I'll leave you with all of the lodging properties that I've spoken to would be happy to work with Nelson County to try to equitably collect taxes from all lodging properties. By our estimates, you may only be collecting 50% of what the county is actually due. And the current proposal puts the burden on all of us who are paying and not the burden on those who are not paying. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. This is Will. Is there a Will here? Will from 39.
Will Fenton.
Will Fenton.
My wife writes all these checks, so I don't have to.
Thanks, sir.
So my name is Will Fenton. I live at 39 Shelton Oil Trail, and I'm the owner of the Fenton Inn. So I've talked to all of you on the phone, except I talked to your better half over there, and I learned a lot. I think she understands the issue extremely well, and I think if you put her, my wife, and a few other people that understand the issue, we could get the collection from the different Airbnbs rolling. Other counties have done it. They've been doing it for 4 years. We're probably missing out on several $1 million a year in revenue lost to that. And it's not just that. when we started our business, we had to pay taxes, business license. I pay taxes on my refrigerator. There's things that are businesses had to do, and we had to go to the county and ask them, what are the procedures that we had to go through. So it was a challenge, but it's not something that every business doesn't have to go through. So it's certainly Airbnb can also go through that step as well. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Well, Brian, is there anyone else who wishes to speak today in regards to anything as a matter? Come on forward, state your name and address. And the 3 minutes is still the same. I know.
You know me. Hi, my name is Tom Brokamp. I live up at 26 Afton Depot Lane in Afton. My wife and I had bought 2 homes up in Afton, 2 little cottages, 34 years ago. And a lot of you know me as the owner of the Livingston Cafe for many years. One of the houses we converted, we had rented long-term for 34 years. Our 25-year tenants moved out, just bought a house down on Pounding Branch, and that is now our home again. We moved back from Waynesboro after a hiatus. And the other house was a long-term rental for all but the last 5 years. It's been an Airbnb and VRBO. Decided to turn it into that after I had one of my tenants rebuild a motorcycle engine in the living room. We carted away tons of debris and flip the house every year. It was very expensive. A lot of people think Airbnb is a huge amount of money. We're about even, but we don't have the wear and tear on the place. Verbo started collecting taxes on behalf of the county. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago. It was a nightmare, I think, for both us and for the county. They only started collecting taxes on the new reservations after the start date. So I was left to figure out what they collected and turned over. And I believe the county was also very confused by the whole thing because they don't get a listing of who gets what. Airbnb, I believe, is set to start collecting and remitting taxes the 1st of July, I believe. I did talk to the tax office. They did see an increase in revenue suddenly out of thin air back when Verbo started collecting. And I believe the same is going to happen on a greater scale. Don't know, but I believe that because I think there are a lot of people that are flying under the radar. To suddenly go to 10%, highest of anybody around, is spooky to me. My boss was a jerk at the cafe, and I don't have a pension. We depend on this. Please consider it strongly. Thanks for what you do. All right. That's all I got.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak?
Good afternoon. My name is Clinton Bibb, Phoenix Road, Arrington, Virginia. I didn't come prepared to speak. I just actually came to listen to the meeting today. I represent a fairly large conglomerate that does large events in the county as well. And not only does a significant increase in occupancy taxes affect cabins, Airbnbs, vacation rentals, Gulf side, cabins on the creek, they also affect temporary campsites, whether they're on a permanent basis or through permits PDH of large-scale events. So everything across the board is affected. To me, that 100% increase on a tax rate is asinine and shouldn't even be a consideration. That is a pretty strong-handed move, in my opinion, and it's probably more of a way to present discouragement of turning buildings into Airbnbs to start with, picking from the inventory of rental properties for long term. And there's most certainly better ways to go about doing that, and better ways to collect, potentially missing revenue as well. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Clinton. Yes, sir.
My name's Hayes Humphries. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Devil's Backbone Brewing Company. Appreciate you guys taking the time to hear the comments. First of all, I support the comments in opposition of the tax increase from my fellow lodging operators. And just to lend weight to the sort of ancillary effects of a tax increase like this, we obviously rely on traffic coming to Devil's Backbone to pay our food and beverage taxes, and we are still at a guest count that's lower than pre-pandemic. We're still hoping that traffic's going to come back. And so anything that's going to keep people out of the county, especially on other days of the week, right? Saturdays are huge for us. People drive in from other counties, from DC, from Richmond, from Charlottesville. But those shoulder days, the Fridays, the Sundays, the Thursdays are days when we're really slow. There's a really significant difference in our business on those days. And local lodging really helps to support those days because those are the people who are staying nearby and looking for a place to have a meal. And so anything that we do to discourage people's ability to stay locally and spend their money at night in the county rather than back in their localities when they go home is a significant detrimental impact to our business and our ability to pay food and beverage tax along with the lodging tax. So I hope as we talk about sort of all the unintended consequences of increasing the tax, that's something that we're keeping in mind. I appreciate your time. Appreciate you guys taking the time and responding by email. And yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Hearing none, we will close the public hearing or public comment section of our agenda. Moving on into the agenda, we have the consent agenda. We have pulled the proclamation. We will recognize John at that time, leaving items A and B, the minutes for approval, and the budget amendment. It is the chair's recommendation that we approve those two items as presented. Do we have a motion, or is there any edits or anything that we wish to ask staff?
What?
Items A and B of the consent agenda. That would be the minutes and the budget amendment.
What is the budget?
We do this every month.
Wait,
It's so.
no, wait, we're not talking.
Steve, can you explain what the budget amendment is this month?
Very minimal. There is appropriation of asset forfeiture funds for the sheriff's department, $1,180, and another transfer of funds, $1,075 to support the budget of the general district court. So less than $3,000.
Okay.
I move that we approve the consent agenda as amended and moving item C.
We have a motion to approve A and B. Do we have support?
I'll second.
We have a second from Mr. Reed. Any discussion? We will pass this without objection. Is there any objections to this? Hearing none, motion passes. Moving on to Proclamation C. We have John with us today. Danny, if you don't mind coming up, saying hi. I mean Java, sorry.
I was like, John.
Sorry, not John. So thank you so much. How's Java? Appreciate all that you do. I had a great conversation with Martha, and glad to have you guys here. So us making this recognition today is of course pertinent to our aging demographics that are within our county. So thank you. Is there anything you have to say?
Thank you all.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, Danny. Mr. Reed, if you don't mind reading the proclamation.
I'm happy to do so. This is Proclamation P 2022-1, Nelson County Board of Supervisors as May 2022 is Older Americans Month. Whereas Nelson County includes a growing number of older Americans who contribute their strength, wisdom, and experience to our community. And whereas communities benefit when people of all ages, abilities, and backgrounds are welcomed, included, and supported. And whereas Nelson County recognizes our need to create a community that provides the services and supports older Americans' need to thrive and live independently for as long as possible. And whereas Nelson County can work to build an even better community for our older residents by planning programs that encourage independence, ensuring activities are responsive to individual needs and preferences, and increasing access to services that support aging in place. Now, therefore, the Nelson County Board of Supervisors does hereby proclaim May 2022 to be Older Americans Month. The Nelson County Board of Supervisors urges every resident to recognize the contributions of the county's older citizens to help create an inclusive society and to join efforts to support older Americans' choices about how they age in their communities.
Got it. We have a motion to approve the Proclamation P 2022-01. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Parr. Let's do a roll call vote.
Mr. Harvey?
Yes.
Mr. Barton? Mr. Parr?
Yes.
Mr. Reed?
Yes.
Mr. Rutherford?
Yes. Thank you all so much. We have, of course, swapped 3 and 4, so we are now in, or not 3 and 4, 4 and 5, so we're now in the authorization to contract architectural services. Mr. Carter.
County staff previously issued a request for proposals for architectural services to provide for the design and construction of a new county office facility that would house the Department of Social Services and the Departments of Building Official and Planning and Zoning. We received 3 responses, statements of qualifications from individual architectural firms. We decided to interview all 3 firms. There were 7 county staff who participated on the interview panel, including 2 Department of Social Services staff, the director and her assistant. The interviews were conducted virtually via Zoom, and the conclusion of the interview panel was to recommend to the board PMA architects from the coast of Virginia. We were, I think, of the 7 panelists, 6 of the 7 ranked PMA as their number 1 choice, the most qualified. The firm illustrated their abilities exceptionally well, including several Department of Social Services facilities. So we would recommend to the board the approval of Resolution R22 2022-27 to authorize staff to contract with PMA architects.
Got it. Is there any questions for Mr. Carter in regards to the authorization to contract architectural services?
I just have a question. Were any of the contractors, the subcontractors listed under the PMA qualifications section, were any of those lead applicants? I mean, did they have other applications of their own? That's a good point.
No. With PMA, the other one of their, I think 2 other sub-consultants, Timmons was on the interview and spoke in concert with PMA staff that they had worked, which their proposal acknowledged several times with a PMA on multiple projects. So that was another positive for the 7 members of the panel.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Carter? Hearing none, can we get a motion to approve R 2022-27 as presented by staff?
So moved.
We have a motion from Mr. Carter. Do we have support?
Yes.
We have support from Mr. Barton. Is there any more discussion? Hearing no discussion, let's do a roll call vote.
Mr. Harvey?
Yes.
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Mr. Parr?
Yes.
Mr. Reed?
Yes.
Mr. Rutherford?
Yes. Thank you so much. Moving on to the proposed amendments to ACRJA service agreement. Mr. Carter.
Resolution R 2022-28 would provide the board's authorization for the rewrite of the Albemarle Charlottesville Regional Jail Authority service agreement, which the authority is comprised of Charlottesville City, Albemarle County, and Nelson County. For the primary emphasis for the rewrite of the member agreement, especially the member agreement, is the ensuing and proposed construction and renovation of the regional jail authority, the regional jail facility. The primary changes, there are 2 primary changes. One is to the membership, the representation. Currently, Nelson County has 2 representatives on the 11-member authority board. What's proposed in the amended agreement is to add a 3rd representative for Nelson and to remove the joint Charlottesville, Albemarle County citizen rep. which would still maintain the 11-member board. The other is to provide for how the members will pay for the jail's operation and debt services, and it will be based upon each locality's prisoner population on an annualized basis. Otherwise, the agreement is substantially very similar to the current agreement. And as is noted, the resolution that we presented proposes the board's consent, or provide the board's consent to this new agreement.
All right, does the board have any questions for Mr. Carter in regards to the additional member?
I do. Mr. Carter, if we approve this resolution and adopt it, what's the next step in terms of having it approved or accepted by the rest of the members?
The jail authority meets this Thursday, and this will be a point of discussion. Both Albemarle and Charlottesville, their meetings are later this month. And my understanding from speaking with the chairman of the authority, who's a member of the Albemarle County Board of Supervisors, is both the city and the county are going to take this up this month, as will the authority. So one of the catalysts for these changes was Nelson's request to add a member, and the chairman of the authority has conferred with both the Albemarle Board and the Charlottesville Board, and subject to final decisions, they've concurred with the change in composition.
Great.
Otherwise, the means to fund operations and debt is going to be substantially the same as it's presently done.
All right, any other discussions? Or any other questions, excuse me? Hearing none, do we have a motion to approve Resolution R 2022-28 as presented?
Yes.
We have a motion for Mr. Barton. Do we have support?
I'll second.
Mr. Reed seconds it. Is there any further discussion? Hearing no discussion, let's do a roll call vote. Ms. Spivey?
Mr. Harvey?
Yes.
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Mr. Carr?
Yes.
Mr. Reed?
Yes.
Mr. Rutherford?
Yes. All right, moving on to Commonwealth Attorney funding request. Mr. Rutherford, Mr. Fleury.
Good afternoon, Daniel Rutherford, the Commonwealth Attorney. I would be remiss if I didn't wish my baby brother a happy birthday. Of course, the Honorable Barton as well. I appreciate the time. I know, you get baby brother. I appreciate all the years of your life I've known you, Jackson.
Yeah.
And many more.
Thanks.
But just as an update is where we are, I have my assistant, Will Flory, who's taken the lead for the drug court. 2 days ago, we received notice from the panel from the Supreme Court of Virginia that was very favorable. They received our application. They had some very friendly amendments, and they look forward to receiving our amendments that we are finishing up and submitting, and with the foresight of approving. So we're moving in a very great direction of getting to having the drug court. It's still again the process, but their amendments were very, very favorable, and they had some. It was great. It was exactly what we're looking for, and it was very fast. They're moving fast as they want to see this as much as we do here in Nelson County. Originally, when we were here, I asked for a supplement for Mr. Flory, and only Mr. Flory, to fund him at the equivalent of $15,000 a year. I know that's a lot, but Mr. Flory has done a tremendous amount of work. He's taken the lead and made something go from very hardly any movement after 4 years to getting an entire packet of 36 pages that I presented to the board or emailed previously, just showing what we've done, what we anticipate as far as the work or other budgets are going. We're now also in the grant writing process. Mr. Flory is doing that. We have we're applying for the kind of 3 different types of grants all in one, and they will give you out what, if we get approved, what they think the need is. The best would be 4 years at $750,000, and 3 years, I think, would then be $600,000, or they break it down. And so depending what our need is, it will be funded for that period of time. That deadline we have coming up at the end of May, and Mr. Flory is working on getting that grant as well. As you'll see in the application that we had submitted, if we don't have a grant, we've created what we anticipated, what we will need for the county to fund drug court if we don't have it. We anticipate it to be about $88,000 between an OER member, drug testing, court services, security, or other matters like that to help assist. That's if we don't have any grant, because we believe it'll be extremely, extremely important to be able to keep going this step with drug court.
I'm not going to re-go over all the numbers. Clearly, we have a lot of individuals in Nelson County who have this addiction issue. And I've made no bones about it. I don't mind litigating. I don't mind going to court and having jury trials. But we need to have more tools in our toolbox to be able to address the addiction issue. So the biggest thing I need is for Mr. Flory to be paid. He's doing all the same work as the assistant Commonwealth's attorney. We've had a host of jury trials. We've had a host of DUI maimings. We've had a host of cases coming down the pipe. We haven't reduced his workload in my office. What he's doing is he's taking on drug court as an additional duty. And so that's why it's important. He's doing an additional work. It's not costing us a new employee to handle this, as most jurisdictions would do that. Mr. Flory has offered to take that as an additional duty, and I think it's just and fair and equitable that he be paid that additional part. And again, that we made sure that there was substantial progress in that just since when we met in January till now working on that. I'm going to turn it over briefly to Mr. Flory to update you on the work he's done. I appreciate the time.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I trust that everybody had an opportunity to look at the application. If you didn't, I'll sort of give you the quick hits. So we are on track with a planned first participant in drug court, January 1, 2023, assuming that we are in a position where we get the grant. I expect us to be relatively competitive. So there are, the Department of Justice administers a grant program through the Bureau of Justice Assistance. And there are 3 tiers to that grant program. The first is drug court implementation grant. The second is drug court enhancement grants. And the third are for establishing statewide programs. The second 2 are not germane to this conversation. We're applying right now for what's called a drug court implementation grant. And that award is, as Mr. Rutherford mentioned, at $750,000 over 48 months. And the vast majority of those funds would be dedicated to staffing. The biggest and most significant line item here is that we have to hire somebody to run this program, a professional probation officer with a background in substance abuse treatment. And those folks are hard to come by right now. You'll notice in the, as Mr. Rutherford mentioned, there's a proposed budget in the last couple pages of the application. That proposed budget is, I would sort of encourage the board to look at that as sort of the floor. That's the cheapest we could do it. There's certainly, I would love to be really competitive and be able to hire somebody to run this program that's really, really good. That's sort of, that number came from what OAR thinks they would expect to hire new employees at. And obviously we want to hire somebody with some experience who understands the program and understands how to run the program, hopefully has some experience running the program. When we submitted our application, we drew heavily on some of the experiences that Fluvanna County has had in the last couple of years in establishing their drug court program. Fluvanna County received a Bureau of Justice implementation grant for $750,000. I think that's a pretty good sign for us that we are likely to be competitive because we're a similar jurisdiction in terms of resources as it relates to this conversation. The ultimate goal is for us to be able to have up to 30 people in the drug court at our current staffing levels. And the reason I want to point that out to you is if you had a chance to look at the application, you'll see that our total drug court eligible offenses year to year are about 186. But if you look back to 2020, that's 243. So if you cut that number in half, because most people have more than one charge, let's say it's around 150 for the sake of argument, we're taking a really significant amount of our 30 people out of that 150 and you divert them from the jail and put them into drug court. That's a significant reduction, both in jail numbers. It'll be a significant reduction in jail costs. And those are people that we're going to rehabilitate, that we're not going to see, hopefully not going to see reoffend, folks that we hope will go on to have productive lives. And those are folks that we expect to be successful when they leave the program. So I'll, since I know you've taken a look at the application, I'll spare you sort of a brief overview of the program, but I wanted to ask the board if they have any questions about the application at this point. So as Mr. Rutherford mentioned, we're in the process of writing that Bureau of Justice
implementation grant right now. That's due on the 20th. I'll be going to Richmond on the 18th to the meeting of the Supreme Court. We did receive word that the committee who reviews our drug court application plans to recommend that our application be approved. I spent the last day responding. We got that response from that group on Monday. They sent us a number of questions. I've been responding to those questions over the last couple of days. I'm waiting for one more statistic from Region 10 so we can send that response off. The next thing, and one of the things that they asked for, is whether or not we had a drug court manual and a drug court participant handbook. And these are sort of the two cornerstone documents of a drug court. The manual tells you how to run tells the drug court team how to run the drug court. And the participant agreement tells the people that are in the drug court what's expected of them. We have a mostly complete manual. I am still working on the participant agreement. These are both significant documents and documents that require the approval of the drug court team to be implemented as part of the program. And so that's the next thing for us. And then we've got to develop all of the documentation that goes along with the program in terms of bringing people in. And then the next step for us, once we get approved, will be to reach out to all of our partner agencies, OAR, Region 10, and establish MOUs with them about rendering services and that kind of stuff. So that'll be the next, once we have the entity formed, that'll be those are sort of the next steps that I'm going to be engaged in over the next couple of months as we work towards that aspirational goal of being up and running by January 1, 2023. Any questions from me at this point? Thank you all.
Mr. Barton.
Are there any requirements for the job of heading this organization other than quality?
Well, so this is the person whose job will be to interact on a day-to-day basis with the drug court participants. One of their primary jobs is to collect oral and urine screens of participants through drug screening. So this is somebody who's got to be a professional probation officer. And so
Is there licenses needed for that?
We will look, I don't know, not that I'm aware of as it relates to the grants or the legal requirements for the program. The way that this will likely work is that we will rely on OAR as our partner agency to vet and employ that person, because that's what they do. They provide probation services. And so they have the expertise in that area where I don't necessarily have it to be able to answer that question. My expectation is they will probably be a licensed clinical social worker, LCSW, and there'll be somebody that has background in probation. You also want somebody who's familiar with the treatment side and who understands, co-occurring substance use, mental health disorders, diagnoses, and sort of, for lack of a better word, fluent in that.
Finding this person is absolutely key.
Absolutely, finding a good coordinator is going to be the key to success.
And I commend you all, Ms. Rutherford, for looking at different ways to deal with a health problem that is, really burdening our nation and so many individuals. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any other questions, Mr. Reed?
So, first of all, thank you for talking to me about this yesterday. The second time you hear it, it starts making sense. That's what happens.
I'll come back as many times as you want to hear. It's just something I'm excited about.
Yeah, well, I am too. It's ambitious to be able to start first of next year, and of course, finding this key person is key to that, and also, the success of the grant. So these are, kind of hurdles we have to get over. And you said that finding a person like this could be a challenge in and of itself, and I'm wondering if there's anything in jeopardy if you don't find either the or a person to initiate this, how that might affect any of the other parameters of us being able to move forward on this.
Yeah, we won't. One of the cornerstones of the program is supervision, right? And so if we don't have that person in place to provide supervision, then we're not going to be able to stand up the program. I think given the timeline that we're working with OAR, we're going to start the sort of thing that begins this whole process is approval, right?
because nobody wants to talk to us about getting hired for something that doesn't exist yet, for lack of a better way to put it. And so the key is to get the approval, and then we can start that conversation with OAR of how we're going to go through that process of hiring somebody and how the funding is going to work. And this is a topic that they're highly familiar with because OAR provides the drug court coordinators for Charlottesville, Albemarle, Fluvanna, and they're getting ready to provide the coordinator for the Orange Madison combined.
And OAR is?
It's the Offender Aid and Restoration. It's your community-based probation group. So they provide community-based probation for post-offense misdemeanor probation and pre-adjudication felonies. So what we call pretrial supervision in the legal parlance. So they're a relatively robust agency up in Charlottesville.
All right, any other questions for the Commonwealth's office? All right, hearing none. The current request is for the, I believe it is 15,000, correct, staff? Yes, 15,000 related to that position. What is the pleasure of the board at this time?
I would move that we approve that $15,000 add into our budget or whatever is required in order to get this moving.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Yes.
We have a second from Mr. Barton. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, let's do a roll call vote.
Mr. Harvey?
Yes.
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Mr. Carr?
Yes.
Mr. Reed?
Yes.
Mr. Rutherford?
Yes, thank you. Moving on to the transient occupancy tax, which is why our audience is here today. Thank you all for staying with us. Staff, if you want to start, I'm sure Pam, we may have some questions for you as well. Steve, if you could kick us off of where we're at. Candy, I don't know if you have anything to present either.
The board's previously conducted a public hearing on the proposed ordinance 2022-01 that would increase the local transient occupancy tax from current 5% to 10%. The staff's estimates for what that additional 5% would generate is $1.3 million. Consideration of the comments the board heard this afternoon. I think the board has three options. There's maybe several options. You can approve the ordinance as presented. You could not approve the ordinance as presented. You could defer the ordinance and, as some of the audience or speakers suggested, monitor to see if there is 50% more revenue out there, 5%. Or you could add or reduce the increase from 10% to something between 5 and 10%. But if you do anything other than approve as presented, the 10% ordinance change, then the board will need to make adjustments in next year's operational budget. That would eliminate $1.3 million, which at this point is targeted to go to the school division. I don't think it's fatal to the county's operations if the board does not approve the ordinance and the increase. You just have to make budgetary adjustments. You can take questions, of course.
Great. I have a few questions. Is there any questions for staff I have some questions for the commissioner. Is there any questions for staff or?
Yeah, I've heard so many different figures about what percentage of people aren't paying the tax. Do you have any figure? Do you have any figure? Or?
No.
That's a Pam question.
Yeah, that's a commissioner revenue question. That's something we don't do.
Yeah. Okay. Pam, you want to come on up?
I got a question first.
Oh, question for staff.
Can you recount how the increase of the tax beyond what goes towards tourism was going to go to schools? I was trying to remember how that.
The board at one of the last work sessions committed, I think, or I'm not sure committed yet, but by consensus said you would allocate an additional $1.5 million to the schools. And I think the discussion, as I recall, was the TOT increase would be targeted towards that increase.
Right.
That doesn't necessarily have to be the case. The board just what we suggest is after the public hearing on next year's budget tonight, that the board reconvene before the June meeting and conduct, a short work session on the budget and then approve the budget. And then you can make adjustments at that time.
But that, if we do not approve the increase in the TOT tax as specified, we would have an additional shortfall to school funding that we would have to make up something.
Right, but the budget, as presented and with the decisions the board made on the real estate tax, could provide for that adjustment. But then it will impact the board's considerations on capital improvements or debt service. And that's why I've suggested, and talked to Ms. McGarry, that it would be helpful to the board, depending on your decision on the tax, the TOT tax, to then conduct, prior to the approval of the budget, another short work session just to regroup and make any necessary adjustments. As I said, we proposed the 10% tax, but as I noted just a minute ago, if the board is uncomfortable at present with it, it won't be fatal to the county's operations. We can make those adjustments.
Did you have a question for Steve, Mr. Harvey?
Well, no, the biggest problem I've got is we're not collecting this tax from the people we should be collecting from. I'd say it's a very low percentage that pays this tax. And if we could collect what is owed, I think we'd more than profit from what's proposed. What are some avenues, or do you have any suggestions as far as, I mean, this, the way the whole thing is set up, it's just not a lot of
Correct.
ways to go back and check it.
Yeah.
Most things we've got ways of checking and all that.
We do as best we can with what we have and our staff. There's like 3 people.
Can you lower your mic down? We can't hear you.
3 people and myself.
Yeah.
We have over 540 that we collect from, and plus Verbo, I don't know how many, because they don't give us a list. We check people's tax returns. We get Schedule C and D's, and we can go to the Department of Taxation. But we've got to know that they're out there, and we check the computer every day. We find a lot of people on Nelson Knows who are written and don't know they're putting it out there. And so we do everything that we know how to do. But of course, we're missing people, and we could do better. I'm working with Jay at Wintergreen. We talk back and forth, and so we're doing as much
Well,
as
that's
we
my
can.
thing. If the people that owed it paid it,
Exactly.
it would be a lot burden on everybody. And
We find people every week, as Kim will tell you, right here.
Yeah.
I mean, and we call them up, well, they've been doing it for 2 years. We didn't know we were supposed to be doing this.
now
And then they pay it.
how far can you go back?
I'm not sure, I know we do on our real estate taxes, we can go back 3 years, but nobody's ever said anything about the lodging. We find
Just to get them on the list would be a lot.
Yeah, well, we do. I mean, every day we find somebody.
We're sending out letters to people.
That's
who
why
think
I
that
would
are doing
have-
lodging.
And say to raise it when we not collect them with there to collect.
My previous question, do you have a percentage? Do you have any idea?
I have no idea. No.
Anybody have any idea? I mean.
Well, I mean, let's not interact with the crowd. I think I have some numbers for you.
What number?
I mean, you know.
So
Yeah.
I think I spent the week, and of course I am also in the short-term rental business myself. I'm up and new, so I've learned how to pay my taxes, I think, so far, as long as the bookkeeper sends me a check. I had an opportunity to kind of surf several different platforms that give you an indication of how many Airbnbs or short-term rentals, is the better term, exist. And so I had stumbled across a couple different websites. One was like airdna.com, and that one I learned a lot. I specifically procured an opportunity on there just to look at the Nelly's Ford zip code. And I think in Nelly's Ford zip code alone, it was 511 short-term rentals. That's
But-
just all of Wintergreen, all of Nelly's Ford, not counting Wintergreen Resort.
But you don't know if they're going through Verbo.
So
and
this,
whether they're paying us.
well,
So you still don't know if they're not paying us.
well,
Because they could be going to
what
somebody else.
I understand that, and it does actually give this particular website, if you have the opportunity to use it, it does indicate whether they're on what platforms, and there's a whole lot of stuff. And I'm sure the private sector can contribute some of that data without the county having to burden themselves with buying the software. And that's just Nelly's Ford. In Afton, there's probably another 100. Throughout the rest of the county, there's probably another few hundred. I'd venture to say that there's probably close to 1,000 short-term rentals in Nelson County, with the bulk of those being Wintergreen, Stony Creek, Nelly's Ford, probably 500-600. If I, just count some rough numbers. It is an intriguing thing, and it's a lot bigger than I ever imagined I thought it to be. And it's everything from not just VRBO, Airbnb, it's also private room rentals, which a lot of people don't look at that, though that's not a massive number. There are some data points that show that on a given weekend, there can actually be $50,000 in revenue just for private rooms, or $50,000 a month in Nelson County, just in the Nelly's Ford area. I think one interesting piece of data, and I had another Airbnb person provide this to me, was how much the Nelly's Ford zip code cash flows a month. And obviously, I don't know how accurate this is. Back in 2019, the average was about $500,000 a month, roughly, just that zip code. And as of late 2021, it had its peak month, which was close to $3.5 million. And now it's averaging out to be about, just the zip code, about $2 million in gross revenue a month, which is just astronomical. It's not even counting, again, the Wintergreen Resort, which is probably several $1 million on top of that, and whoever else. It's astronomical. And I think with the assistance of the private sector, we can really pinpoint who these groups are. And honestly, if we pinpoint the Wintergreen area, we will find 80% of those who aren't paying their taxes.
So he says 1,000.
Roughly, it's a guess.
Well, how many are paying?
Well, we don't know exactly. We have roughly 540 some plus furlough. We don't know how many they're
So
paying
they
for because
yeah.
they don't give us a list. They just know they check.
So something like 2/3 are paying?
Ish, maybe. We don't know.
But
Yeah,
that would be a
roughly,
guess.
if you guess, yeah.
And we found a lot of these people.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of them.
It's not only the Wintergreen area, it's all over the county.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's just not as many of them, but percentage-wise, it's gonna be the same.
And so I'd venture to say, without us taking action on the tax, we could find that revenue just by enforcement. And that is the mechanism that I would encourage today, how we can help you. You let us know if you want a subcommittee. I have no problem sitting on that with some of the stakeholders in the short-term rental industry. I have the guise of the government brain a little bit, and a little bit of my own experience in short-term now, which is not much, but I think with some of the databases that exist in the short-term rental market, it's there, and there's a lot of people who are paying for it, and they probably allow us to help pinpoint who those people are.
I understand your point, but I still think we need to have a discussion.
Sure. Oh,
What
yeah.
we're talking.
No, absolutely. I was, yeah,
About the
sure.
10% rate, that is still
You can have a
up
seat
for
up there.
discussion, is it not? Or is it-
Oh, yeah, that's what we're all here for.
Is it time for that?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Now, unlike some other governments, we have to balance our budget. We have to come up with the revenue to pay for what the services we offer the people of Nelson County. Now, industry we're talking about benefits greatly from what the government does, because the primary attraction in Nelson County is the beauty. That's why people come here. I've seen this board, and this board has made decisions to protect the beauty of this county. And you and your industry benefit greatly from it. But don't necessarily pay for that benefit. There also are other costs that we as a county bear for your industry, having to do with traffic, garbage, different kinds of things. Now, I think that
And you people talk about 100% increase. It's a 5% increase on the cost of coming to Nelson County. We're proposing a 5% increase. Now, the laws of supply and demand are gonna tell you that that will diminish demand. But how much will it diminish demand? When you can compare the benefits that could come from that revenue. Now, we have not fully funded our schools. You as members of this community, I know, support education. I would maintain that a 5% increase in the price of lodging in Nelson County will have much smaller impact on the demand for this service than the money that would be accrued by Nelson County could do to benefit the people of Nelson County. And I call upon you to recognize that. It's never been my way to try to win an argument. But I just want you to think about what I just said. And the benefits that might accrue to the county further. Now, remember, we're not asking you to pay more money. We're asking the people who come to Nelson County from other places, who come here for the beauty, to contribute to the cost of maintaining that beauty. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Harvey?
But the problem is, I can think of a lot more that don't pay this tax than I can that do pay this tax. So my thing is, I would, and it's just a thrown out number, I say there's probably less than 40% that's paying it. So there's a 60%. If you want to get some money, instead of raising the ones that are doing right, let's work out a program. And I don't think it's a real good setup. The way it's monitored and stuff, I've had to do a checkpoint on it, but if we could collect the tax that's owed, I think it would make a tremendous amount more difference.
No, I agree with you, but I also say that is, we all agree on that. We gotta make the people pay the tax.
Don't penalize the people that are paying it.
I know that, but also, there's another issue here having to do with the cost of maintaining the beauty of Nelson County. I agree with you.
But again, Skip, you're missing that link where if you receive the money that the county is owed, it could do a lot more than what's going on. And it does look bad when you double anything.
I can agree with you more on that. I totally agree. Not agree.
Mr. Reed?
I'm pretty much in agreement with both of you on this, but to me, this is not just a question of revenue or tax or who's paying it. Our short-term rental system, no matter how you look at it, is just it's not equitable, as we've seen by our discussion on revenues. The impacts that short-term rentals have on single-family housing stock in the county is not positive. When you're looking at new construction in the county, oftentimes what you're looking at is further increasing the short-term rental stock in the county, which affects everybody, not just us, but those people that already have existing short-term rentals in Nelson County, because you're increasing the supply. So we're not the first county to grapple with this by a long shot, or the first locality. There are various possibilities in terms of registration, regulation, and other things that can be done to limit the negative impacts of short-term rentals in the county and maximize those to the people as well. So while you can't give everybody everything they want, I think that before we consider, increasing the tax on the existing short-term rentals in the county, that we would, I would say, fast track the planning commission, the county administration, and whoever else we can, and certainly supported by the people in the county who have brought more information to bear on this than anybody, to put their heads together as quickly as possible, and that through our planning department we come up with a range of alternatives that then we can consider that would be more equitable, less harmful, and beneficial to all residential sectors in the county, because they're all affected by this. So my idea would be to not pass the tax now as proposed, the tax increase. I'm not averse to a possible tax increase in the future. Again, this is tied to school funding. Whether that's a good idea or not is up to you. I don't think it's particularly a good idea. I'd like to see the county step up and fund the schools, but more than that, what I'd like to see is in this, for this issue, is that the county, really aggressively look for some policies about short-term rentals that can benefit everybody, and then we would have an opportunity to look at that, and then determine if increases are warranted, if additional revenue is warranted, and how we can do that without burdening the county or the folks in the community.
The problem is, in most cases, the state has got something out there to go by, that this is the way it's taxed, it's hard to get around it and all that kind of stuff. But this is almost like nobody's over monitoring it, and it's almost all voluntary all the way. I don't think that's the way it's intended. But yeah, I'd say, I don't want to do any guessing, but you would collect, you're missing a lot more taxes than you're collecting.
And I do know that some of the things that have been put in place in other localities, we may not be able to implement here because of the Dillon rule. So there are, so it's going to take some in-depth, research and outreach to try to find out what other things are. But I certainly agree with you about the revenue portion of that.
Well, it should be simple. I mean, but it's just, I don't know, it's the only thing as far as taxes go that we deal with, that there's nothing that jabs you to pay it.
Right.
And before I want to add the tax, I want to collect what I'm owed.
Yeah. And I would bet we can make it simple.
Yeah.
What I would suggest, and Mr. Parr, I'm sorry if I'm skipping over you, unless you want to go now.
No, you go right ahead.
All right. I was going to suggest a subcommittee. Yeah, that's right. You know it. A subcommittee of sorts. We could comprise of myself, Mr. Reed, and several members from the public, and the Commissioner of Revenue, and a staff member. And I think that between that entity, it can really pinpoint, without having to use the board's time, how to best enforce what a good process and procedure is. And then, if once we've figured out that enforcement mechanism, then we can come back and say, hey, what further do we want to do? My goal is making sure those who aren't paying are paying, and I think the best way for us to do that is a couple of us, a bunch of the community, and some large stakeholders, such as Wintergreen Resort and WPOA, and whoever we think makes sense, the Commissioner of Revenue and one of our staff. And I think that would be a great next step. And probably it would take the public to talk to each other before we had that meeting and say, hey, here's the list of people, and pinpoint it. And we can hopefully pinpoint that to our database in the county and make sure we're paying. So that's my thoughts. Your turn.
Who'd you say on the committee?
Do you want to be on it?
No, I did not. I said who?
I would suggest, since obviously Mr. Reed is interested, I have no problem participating since I've also been part of it. But if you want to,
No, I was just wondering who all you were.
I was
Suggesting
thinking a
me
couple of
propose.
us, and then maybe like 4 or 5 stakeholders of the community,
Okay. I
art
just
staff,
didn't hear the stakeholder part. because, Then
us
my
staff.
turn.
Oh, yeah.
So one thing I do want to say is the stakeholders, congratulations to you all for getting together on all this. Congratulations to you. But when you all leave here, you all have already taken the afternoon off. Y'all should get together and organize and get some type of a group, an official group for your industry in the county. I think kind of like the Nelson County Home Builders Association or
Should
whatever.
be the same thing.
Now's the time. You all have the motivation and the energy, and I think you have your president. I just want to thank all of you that reached out to me and to all of us. And I want to apologize for any of you that I didn't get back to or return the calls because we were inundated with contact on this. So it was a lot of people to get back to and I didn't. A couple things. One thing that was said earlier a couple of times was that the transient occupancy tax increase would be agreed to go to the schools. And I don't know, I must not be remembering things correctly because that's not how I recall the conversation. I thought we decided that we weren't going to allocate it for anything specific. It was just going to go into our general budget. Because one thing that I specifically remember throwing out was, if we're going to do this, that I wanted it to be going towards something that we could touch and feel, something that the community could say, this is what is paying for this park or this swimming pool or this aquatic facility or these ball fields or whatever the thing is. I specifically remember saying, if we do it, that's what I want. And then the conversation kind of went sideways and we decided not to do that, just to put it in the regular budget. But to me, I feel like saying the word schools is a good buzzword for a bad economic decision. But I've learned a whole lot in the last week, thanks to members of that community. And what I thought that was proposed by the county administrator as somewhat of an invisible tax to the locality, turns out it is a tax on our small business owners here in the county. And I said at the last meeting, I travel, I go to Airbnbs, and I look at the per night rate, and that's all I look at. And then at the end, you're like, good grief, cleaning fees and taxes and all this, and it expands. But it never drives my decision on where I'm going to stay. Just like when I go out to eat, the meals tax doesn't drive what I'm getting for dinner. I look at the menu, I decide what I want, I get it. But I now understand that it's a little different in this industry and the way these taxes are paid. So that was a big deciding factor on me, in case you haven't figured it out, not supporting this, any action on this tax. But who pays it is the visitor, is the business. But here's my thing, until we're comfortable and confident that we're collecting at least 80% of this tax locally, then I can't support making any change to the existing, because it feels to me like we're penalizing the honest business owner and rewarding the people who are cheating the system or who are too ignorant to the system that they don't know they're supposed to be paying. Whichever the case may be, I think we have an opportunity. But in the words of Mark Cuban, for that reason, I'm out. That's all I have to say.
Okay. What's the board think of that subcommittee idea? Mr. Reed, are you open to that?
I'd be happy to be on it, but staff participation is really vital.
Oh, no,
To be able to know that what we can and can't do, or at least what we can't do. I mean, the community can pretty much say what we can do, but what we can't do is equally important. And we have, both planning and revenue, directly involved in this. I'd certainly like to see at least those two, to be participants.
Oh, yeah,
as
no,
staff on
sure,
that.
absolutely.
And
Dylan, you got drafted.
Well, the other thing is that everyone's plates are full, and this, to do this right, you know, there are other people we can reach out to try to get more information, but I would like to see this happen. One of the things we talked about before is that, you know, that if something goes into effect, the best time to do it is not mid-year, or at the beginning of the budget period. It's the beginning of the year when the Commissioner of Revenue can actually, you know, deal with the revenue situation and collections. So if we have something in place, you know, prior to next year's budget discussions, I think that would be a really good thing, because at that time we can look at all those things that we have in front of us in terms of revenues and expenses and decide if the increase is warranted.
The only reason why I think us doing this subcommittee, if we don't start today, we'll miss out on potentially an organic $1 million of revenue because people aren't paying the tax. And that's why I think time is of the essence on that. And if we do it soon, I really think it's a lot simpler than we think. That's really going to come down to how we can build something for the Commissioner of Revenue so that they have a quick, easy enforcement mechanism. You know, get a legal name and you can call a summons, hopefully. And maybe the Commonwealth can help on that, man. He's over there.
We have.
Yeah, but I would ask that the purview of the committee, you know, not be just about revenue, because there's other.
This is the initial.
Right.
This is round one.
Just for the.
If we can figure out the enforcement mechanism, then we can get that next one.
I'd like to see them happen together, because each is going to affect the other.
Okay. So, subcommittee or not?
I like the idea of the committee, or I don't necessarily know you need to appoint the members of the
No,
committee right now. I think you need to have conversations with people, build a committee.
All right, I'll lead the committee. Is that okay?
Well, that's fine. I'm just
All
saying.
right. We'll start the conversations. And I'll report back in July with how our committee's going. I know, we're not gonna get this done by June. Maybe, we'll see. All right, so short-term rental people outreach to some of y'all, Pam, Dylan, Commonwealth, we'll all kind of have a powwow at some point with our staff as well, hopefully, and have a discussion on enforcement, hopefully. So, does that work? Thank you, guys. No action on TOT unless somebody has a motion.
You do realize you've got two other board members.
Oh, sorry, yeah, you're over here. What do you want to do?
You spent the whole damn morning.
I was looking that way.
Exactly.
I know. Do you have something else you'd like to add?
Well, not right now, no.
Mr. Barton?
I said what I thought.
All right. So I'm not hearing any actions on TOT. It's fine. I will outreach to some of our folks, and I'll pick some folks, and we got to make it relatively effective. So thank you all. Have a great day. Do you guys want to go to recess before we get to the next item? Or, well, I guess we get closed sessions. Let's go on to the proposed joint ag facility with Amherst County. Steve. Yeah, let's keep going. Let's do that and then do a recess.
You can do reports.
Well, we got the last one. I figured we finished all of them.
Just one more item.
But we still have section 4.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I know. I was just trying to get through here. Oh, yeah, you're right. We could get all of them. I think I do. Sorry. It's a little upside down. 4 and 5.
Cheesecake with rolls.
Coffee is needed. All right, folks, if we could calm down the gallery, that'd be great. Mr. Carter? No, let's just go ahead and continue with the ag facility. All right. Guys, if you could continue your conversations outside, that'd be great. Mr. Carter?
I included this subject to agriculture complex in my report, so I make reference to that report to the board, which I handed out earlier, which included the attachment from Architectural Partners, which was received late last week. It's the 80% progress submittal. Architectural Partners is the lead consultant for this study, with joint study between Amherst and Nelson counties. Their subconsultant, engineering subconsultant is Hurt Profit. As I noted in the report, Architectural Partners Mark Smith is the lead consultant for AP. And
That noise out there, I'm not being able to hear you that well.
Hey, Clinton, can you tell them to head down the hallway a little bit more?
Either that or close the doors.
Oh, yeah, you got, well, I guess you just leave it slightly open, Clinton.
So we can't close the doors.
Huh?
You said we can't close the doors.
I don't think there's any reason. That's fine. We got public.
Ready? So as noted, the report included with my report is the 80% progress report from Architectural Partners, who's the lead consultant on the agricultural complex feasibility study with Amherst County. Interestingly, Mr. Smith from Architectural Partners conferred with Dean Rogers, the Amherst County Administrator, and what the board received from Architectural Partners at the December 7th strategic planning retreat, December 2nd, 2021, was confirmed by Mr. Rogers as being the scope of the project, contrary to what the board heard in February, I think, from some of the representatives from Amherst County. So when you have time to study this 80% progress report, you'll note that the composition of the project remains the same as you heard in December. The cost estimate, which will be revised and increased upwards, is still just below $52 million. What Amherst related to Architectural Partners was the arena, indoor arena seating was not sufficient. They would increase it to 3,700 seats from the present 1,300 seats, and add aquaculture facility to the project, which I don't believe are included in the 80% progress report. But what Amherst, at least to their county administrator, confirmed was the scope of the project as was presented to the board in December of last year, which was based on a PowerPoint Amherst County had developed, continues to be the same scope. One of the outstanding questions, which I don't believe is going to be resolved when this report is finished, is the adequacy of water on the site. There is an existing well, but the Architectural Partners nor Profit have any understanding, don't believe that its capacity will be sufficient for the gallons per day, which I think, if I recall correctly, is about just over 26,000 gallons per day based on the scope as conceived. They don't think the existing well, which was, I think, for residential property, is no longer there, is sufficient for that. As the board may recall, Architecture Partners at Nelson County's request had revised the scope of the work to look more intensively at water capacities, sewer capacities, etc. The board here said no to that, and my understanding is Amherst hasn't undertaken that either. So I think you're going to note that the report is pretty much unchanged, with more work to do. What Mr. Rogers suggested to me in an email was that the county's committee members, which really are just Mr. Rutherford and Mr. Carr, review the report and make any comments back to Architecture Partners, and that in talking to Mark Smith, county staff here, once the input from the two counties is received, that they could wrap this up in about 3 weeks.
Any questions for Mr. Carter at this time? Okay. Hearing none, I know Mr. Barton, Mr. Reed, you guys want to talk about a couple things in your.
Mr. Carter, what do you feel about this project?
I don't think I've made it unclear that I don't support the project. I don't think it's in the county's best interest. Of course, that's not my decision.
It's 24 years of experience, right?
Well, 35 and a half.
35 and a half, I'm sorry. Why?
Well, I think the biggest question is if the scope as presented, and as I noted, it's been confirmed again by Amherst, which was their original scope, is going to be north of $52 million. How's that going to be paid for? And then if somehow a miracle occurs and it is paid for with debt service, how are operations going to be sustained? I mean, it just seems a very difficult proposition to me that's in Amherst County.
Well, the most interesting, we took the trip down to Pennsylvania and got a tour by the person who runs it. One of the, you brought up operations. He made it quite clear that in order for that place to even survive, he was doing all sorts of things and lucking out, not lucking out, and felt that, you know, it was hanging on, just hanging on. And then, you know, he made it, in my mind, very clear that there's something that was incredibly similar to exist in Amherst County.
But if I
Didn't
may,
make any sense to him at all.
yeah, again, it's not my decision, but I'll reiterate to the board what I've reported to you previously. Mr. Rogers in Amherst County may deny this, but he told me at the onset of this project, when I asked him how this thing was going to be paid for, he said ultimately the two counties are going to pay for it. You know, $52+ million if it proceeds as conceived.
Well, you know, I asked the guy, it was how they paid for it, how they got started. And they were totally dependent upon tobacco money initially to get started. And I'm curious where we think we're gonna get that initial money, or Amherst County thinks they're gonna get that initial money to get started.
One possible source is through the Go Virginia program, but I don't think that's going to yield, if it stays at the current cost estimate or greater, that amount of money. That would take a lot of due diligence. And I'll remind the board, as I said, I'm not supportive of this project. When I asked Mr. Rogers on the county's business park project if they would be the county's partner in name only, so that the county, if the board decided to proceed with the business park project, could realize greater Go Virginia funding, because that is a source for that type of project. Because it would be a regional project with two different Go Virginia regions, council would be able to realize greater funding. But the answer would be absolutely not. They won't partner with us, why would we want to partner with them?
I just get the feeling that they were really interested in purchasing the land.
And
I
could be completely wrong about this.
What?
I could be completely wrong about it, but my experience, my instincts tell me I'm not.
And we have really, I mean, tremendous projects in front of us that we could do for the people of Nelson County. Now, some of the things down that we could do, maybe do in Nelson County would be beneficial. I would like to see some of those things. But the scope of what they're talking about, the necessity to fund that thing with all sorts of events and things, it was made pretty clear to me that the person who ran their facility doubted we could do that.
As you have noted probably several times now, when I spoke to Mark Smith, someone at length about this 80% progress report. He confirmed several times that he'd spoken to Amherst County and the scope of the project was as presented to the board in December of last year. and it's still containing its 80% progress report. It's not downsized as the board previously heard earlier this year.
All right, thank you, Steve. At this time, we are still waiting for the completion of the study, correct? Okay. Any further comments?
Well, I have, a report to build on what Mr. Bartlett said from our visit in Chatham. One thing of note is that the Chatham facility was modeled on a facility that's in Lumberton, North Carolina. And the only reason that I'm familiar with Lumberton, North Carolina is because it was scheduled to be the terminus of the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, so I actually researched Lumberton. And if you've been to Lumberton, Lumberton is a predominantly African-American, Native American community, incredibly depressed, and has no tourism economy at all. And so the effort of the Lumberton facility that they had down there was to, try to bring revenue and people into the area to try to generate something in the area. And that's what the Chatham facility was built on, that model where there was not a lot of tourism in Chatham, and this was a way to bring people to the county. Mr. Harris, who runs the facility, said, virtually said that the facility doesn't make money. You could fill it up every weekend with events and you would still live or die on grants. He spends 95% of his time chasing money, trying to keep the facility, to keep money going in there. Not only did the facility begin with tobacco money to get it initiated, it also depended on condominium agreements with the major people that have offices in there, the Farm Bureau and others. And what that meant was, as part of being a condo owner and putting a lot of money up front to get it off the ground, those people were going to have free access to the meeting rooms and the facilities. Well, Mr. Harris shared with us the challenge that brings to him, because he's dependent on bringing events from outside of the county there that bring lots of money into the facility, whereas the people that are the bedrock of the community there want to have it for free. And those weekends, when they can possibly have weekend events, they're in direct competition with each other, trying to figure out if they're going to get something or nothing from making it available. Most of the events that happen on a local basis don't produce any revenue for the facility. And yet, one of the things that he said is that the only reason that they have been able to continue with what they're doing is because he has what they call total community commitment to what they're doing. They have about 50 banners on the inside of the arena from different organizations, different businesses and such, and they depend on generating over $30,000 a year just by selling banner space inside that arena for when people are there. The fact that clearly Mr. Harris felt like a facility in Amherst County would definitely make it more difficult for him to do what he needs to do at his facility, because they'd be in direct competition, made it very difficult to put a positive spin on when we were there. In fact, I would have to say that I don't know if Mr. Harvey would agree with this, but I think that outside of a couple of the staff people that were working there, the tone was pretty somber. I mean, there wasn't much excitement generated during the tour about what it was or what something in Amherst might be. That's my report.
All right. So at this time, as it relates to the ag facility, the plan is to finish the study. We are how many weeks out roughly?
Mr. Smith from Architecture Partners said once any further input from the two counties is received, they can wrap it up in about 3 weeks.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. And we will wait to see what that has to do.
So we had 4 board members attend.
Yes. Mr. Harvey, did you have anything else you'd like to report? No. I was able to attend. I was there for a brief moment. I was there for an hour, 30 minutes before, 40 minutes before the rest came. And I had a chance to see the facility and hear about I didn't get a chance to see the vocational side of it, which I was very interested. But as I had spoken with Mr. I think it was Mr. Bryant and Mr. Harris briefly on kind of how the interactions were with that. I didn't get a chance to see how many pupils they were turning out, and that was some info I know. Ernie, you didn't get a chance to go see it, did you? No. So that was more interest to me. It was a very beautiful facility, very large. They definitely do have a considerable number of events. I think the question of, what sides of that facility would be with Amherst. I know it's been emphasized it's career and technical education. So, and some of that was very industry specific to, heavy equipment, welding and whatever other opportunities could exist. So I think necessarily was that the entire example of what we would be? I don't know. But I imagine we would definitely be catered towards the career and technical side is what I was imagining more. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's just, whichever way we go on this, I think it's important that we realize, and I'll tell you, I'm tired. I'm tired of, and I'm going to support whatever the board decides to do, but I'm tired of the half-truths that we've been getting, some untruths, inequitable comparisons, and unprofessional reactive responses about this project. But, comparing this, the comparison is just made, comparing this situation and the proposal to the business park is comparing apples and oranges, because the proposal, the location of this, whether it's in Amherst County or Nelson County, was picked because it was equidistance between the 2 high schools, and that was one of the reasons. But I think we're forgetting the scope of the project was mentioned a couple of times, and personally, I couldn't care less if the scope of the project was $51 million or $151 million. The investment requested from day one from Nelson County was only half of the land acquisition. And then, of course, we're doing some studies. So of a $1.2 million land acquisition, $600,000, let's call it $700,000 from Nelson County. So let's not provide half-truths and say that this is a $51 million project for Nelson County to share half of, because that has never been a proposal by anyone except 2 county administrators who obviously don't neither support the project in the first place. So I'm just saying, let's just be aware of what's being told to us and what the reality is. Okay. But once we decide, we need to find out if there's water before we can do anything else. And if we find out that there's not water, then the point is moot. It's really irrelevant. But if we decide that there is water and we want to move forward, then, we'll talk about it at that time. But
It's not unprofessional what I said, and I remind the board that when this was presented to the board, it wasn't to pay for half the land, it was to pay for half of the study only.
Okay. All right, moving on. We are now going on to reports, appointments, directives, and correspondence. Moving on to the county administrator's report.
Current status on the COVID-19 virus in the county, per the Department of Health's most recent data as of yesterday. Based upon a 13-week average, the county's had 3 new cases of the virus and a 7-day average new daily cases of 2.9 cases. To date, the county has had 2,572 cases of the virus and 35 deaths. Per the Center for Disease Control, the county status is at a low risk for the virus. The 2022 general reassessment of real estate, the Board of Equalization will complete its work on May 11th, and the submittal of the board's final report to the Board of Supervisors, we think shortly thereafter. The comprehensive plan, the joint Board of Supervisors and Planning Commission meeting, kickoff meeting with the consultant for the comp plan project, the Berkeley Group, is planned for May 31st. Bishop, Director of Planning and Zoning, is facilitating that meeting, and we encourage the board to confirm your availability on May 31st. The Piney River Water and Sewer System, the Yusimco pump station repairs, repair of the station to restore it to full operational capacity continues, and as we continue to repair it, the repairs seem to become more complex and difficult, but we are in the process of getting that essential pump station back to full operational status. Repair of the termite damage in the hallway on the judge's side of this chambers of the circuit court courtroom. As we previously reported, county staff issued an invitation for bids with the due date of April 19. No bids were received. We reached out to local contractors, really no interest from local contractors. So I reached out to Jamerson Lewis, who did the Phase 2 courthouse project, and they have expressed interest in doing the work. So the next step is to actually engage them and hopefully get them under contract to repair that termite damage. Real issue is not the actual flooring, but the substructure below that is going to require some more extensive repairs. The VDOT TAP grant program, the Commonwealth Transportation Board's 6-year improvement plan for the primary highway system, fiscal years 23 to 28, included $734,000 in funding for the Gladstone Depot project. That would be $587,000 in state federal funding with a 20% match, local match of $147,000. Funding for the Loveington Sidewalk project was not included in the 6-year plan. So the next steps for that would be, once the 6-year plan is officially approved and becomes effective July 1st, sometime probably late summer or early fall, VDOT staff will contact the county staff on a contract for that project.
Can I question? Who's going to coordinate the grant for the Gladstone Depot?
The funding will come to the county, so the board will have to decide, one, if it can accept it, and two, if you do, then the county staff will have to administer it.
County staff,
That's
which would be like you.
right. And so what this funding will do is not the complete overall restoration of the depot building and its relocation from its current site to an adjacent property. What the funding will provide for is the National Environmental Protection Act, NEPA assessment, pollutants potentially on the site, asbestos, underground storage tanks, things like that. Design of the new foundation for the depot structure, and site preparation for the foundation and placement of pier footings. The original total project estimated cost is almost $3.2 million. So this would just be phase 1 of multiple phases to come. Already discussed the agricultural project, Renaissance Ridge housing development. I'll note that the Planning and Zoning Departments received a preliminary major site plan from the developers of that project, but the site plan is incomplete and we won't review it until a final fully complete site plan is submitted. As an example, no state approvals from VDOT, Department of Health, or DEQ have been received to date. And the project proposes to construct 136 units in a phased development process. The state biennium budget for the next 2 fiscal years, I checked with their legislative liaison yesterday, and seemingly the budget is just lingering in the General Assembly without any real or unknown progress on agreement for final budget. So we're just sort of in limbo waiting. And the county's budget, after tonight's public hearing, the board could reconvene within the ensuing 7 days to consider approval of the budget, including, as I suggested earlier, work session to make any final adjustments. Any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Carter at this time? Hearing none. Thank you, Steve. Moving on to board reports. Mr. Barton. You don't have anything? Mr. Harvey? Mr. Reed? Mr. Parr? All right. Nothing more than PDC. We do have a date for the Regional Housing Partnership Convention. Can you write, if y'all want to write this down? It is December I got it right here. December the 9th. You probably want to block out your whole day, or at least the morning after. This is the Regional Housing Partnership Conference. So we're bringing in some stakeholders and conversation people about affordable housing and what that looks like. So we sure would love to have the board at least come. It might be some new provoking thoughts. It's going to have some great speakers. And of course, the county and planning commissioners. Please, I'll make sure I remind the planning commission as well.
On Friday, December 9th.
Yes, yep. And we'll let you know the location as we get closer. All right. Other than that, I have nothing else. Moving on to appointments. We do have one appointment. That's for Candy at the jail board. She is to be the alternate. I think that's a perfect move. Obviously, Candy, you want the job, potentially, on that? All right. Do we have a motion to put Candy as the alternate for the ACRJ jail board? Yes. We have a motion from Mr. Reed. Do we have a second? Second from Mr. Barton. Any discussion? Hearing none, this will pass without objection. Any objections? Hearing none. Thank you, Candy. Moving on to correspondence, Mr. Barton. Mr. Harvey. Mr. Reed? Nope. Mr. Parr?
No, sir.
I don't have any correspondence. Moving on to directives. Mr. Barton, do you have any directives?
We can have a closed section.
We're just trying to get through all of this and then the closed session after that. Do you have any directives, Mr. Barton? Mr. Harvey? Mr. Reed? Okay, Mr. Parr?
No, sir.
The only directive that I was thinking of, which is more so a resolution, just recognizing kind of something that I think would be good is recognizing our law enforcement and EMS, especially those who've contributed a lot. This comes to mind with the late Mr. Jeffrey Harris, who was a state trooper for Nelson County. The guy, he was well liked by many Nelsonians, and I think it would be a good tradition here in Nelson that when a good servant of our county, especially in our law enforcement EMS realm, we make a tradition of recognizing them and their importance to our community and that family and whatnot. So I may ask staff and put that on the agenda in the June meeting, recognizing Jeffrey Harris's service to our county. All right, that's the only directive I have. Other than that, we are going into a closed session. Mr. Payne, are you prepared? Staff, you guys good? So, Mr. Reed, you ready to read? All right, we'll do a 2-minute recess, then we'll go into closed session. 5-minute recess. 5-minute recess. Okay.
Do we want to add
I don't think
we don't need to. Okay.
We don't need to.
Great.
I feel pretty comfortable talking to everyone.
I have nothing on this.